Learn the pain of loss, rather than the pain of not having. When people see something they don't possess, they think, if only that were mine. This is the pain of not having, the desire to possess. To escape this pain, we need to ask, what if this weren't mine? In other words, imagine losing what you currently possess. Instead of thinking, I wish I lived in a house like that. When seeing someone else's nice home, look at your own house and think, where would I live if I didn't have this house? Living in this house is truly something to be grateful for. In that moment, your humble house will feel more precious than the splendid one you saw. In other words, to realize the value of your possessions, your wealth, health, loving partner, friends, or family, you must first imagine what it would be like without them. If I didn't have even this wealth, what would have become of me? If I imagine lying sick in bed, I'll feel grateful for my current health. If I think of not having my partner, friends, or family, wouldn't that be an unimaginably unhappy situation? Only then will I avoid wasting my wealth, take better care of my health, treat my partner and friends better, and prevent anger toward them in advance. Regret is self-torture. Carefully saddle your horse, then ride boldly. This saying comes from Goethe's collection of maxims. Once you start something and do your best, if you fail, you must forget it cleanly. Human affairs are always accompanied by chance and error. When we face misfortune or our efforts fail, we think, I didn't expect this, or if only I hadn't done that, it wouldn't have come to this, and we regret. But such regret is no different from torturing yourself. In such cases, follow the example of King David of Israel. When his young prince was ill, David prayed fervently to Yahweh for recovery. But when the prince died, he rose, changed his mood, and didn't indulge in regret at all. For those who can't easily resign themselves, appeal to your reason and acknowledge that our lives are fated with unavoidable destinies. If you have nothing you want to do, there's no reason to live. The human body bursts when pressure is removed. Likewise, the human mind is destroyed without the pressure of suffering. Just as a ship needs an object to exert pressure to sail, humans need the pressure of physical or mental suffering. Thus, labor, poverty, guilt, or mental anguish must accompany humans. This leads to the conclusion that the things we so desperately want to cast off are, in fact, burdens we must carry to live like fate. If everything we desire is satisfied, every wish fulfilled, and there's no need to sweat, what are we supposed to do with our lives? Just eat and stare at the sky. Spending all those years doing what? With endless time, endless money, living in any grand house you choose, turning a wink into a lover, becoming a company president just by wishing, traveling freely as you please. If there's nothing left to want, do, or become, how will you live? In that case, humans would invite their own destruction through boredom or create greater suffering, like wars or disasters. This leads to one conclusion. Humans absolutely need personal and social suffering, and we should not accept this suffering as pain, but embrace it willingly and joyfully. Only those who've shed tears of sorrow can shed tears of joy. Humans feel pain, but they don't feel the absence of pain. They worry, but don't feel the absence of worry. They feel fear, but don't feel safety. They feel thirst, desire, or hope, but lose interest as soon as they grasp it. Like drinking water greedily in intense thirst, and discarding what's left, desire is let go once fulfilled. Even the three great goods of life, health, youth, and freedom, cannot be felt while you have them. Who goes to the hospital when they're not sick? Youth is taken for granted, and when free, freedom itself feels absent. But the moment you're locked in a cell for a minor crime, you instantly feel how precious freedom is. Humans don't realize they're happy when they are, but when they become unhappy, they realize those were happy times. Thus, there's no such thing as present happiness. Happiness exists only as a memory of the past. The thrill of pleasure and enjoyment fades the stronger it is, becoming nothing once it's a habit. When even the habit of pleasure ends, only pain remains. Boredom slows time, while pleasure erases the sense of time. This leads to a conclusion. Just as extreme thirst makes you realize water keeps you alive, painful events make you appreciate health, aging reminds you of youth's value, and extreme confinement teaches you freedom's worth. Thus, the misfortunes we've so hated and avoided are essential conditions for feeling happiness. If only coming back from the brink of death lets you taste life's greatest joy. How can we reject any misfortune or pain? A large shadow covers a small one. To measure how much happiness someone enjoys, don't count their joys, but how much pain they have. The less significant their pain, the greater their happiness. When someone suffers over trivial matters, it means they're currently enjoying happiness. When great misfortune strikes, small worries don't even register. Life is an endless war without truce. To find comfort in all misfortune and pain, look at those more wretched than you. When a healthy person feels miserable, visiting a hospital's intensive care unit makes them realize how fortunate they are, offering the greatest comfort. What result does this bring to humans? Think of a butcher eyeing a herd of cows, grazing leisurely in a field. Aren't we humans like those cows, facing unknown misfortunes? Today we may enjoy a happy day, but we're left vulnerable to crises, not knowing when disease, disaster, war, sorrow, or pain will strike. Thus, peace or happiness is merely a brief respite gained by chance. Soon, we must face the struggle with pain. Until we escape that pain, endless traps await, requiring constant challenges. Life is a continuous, endless war with pain, and moments of happiness or satisfaction are fleetingly brief. Thus, we reach the conclusion that we live armed against pain until we die. All humans are prisoners sentenced to life and death. Thinking of our childhood brings to mind a theater. A child is like someone facing the play of life unfolding before them. Children are full of expectation that the play will be fun, but whether it will be fun, make them laugh, cry, or fear is completely unpredictable. The fate awaiting a child is just like that. Whether their life will be happy or unhappy is unknowable and unpredictable. But one crucial fact is this: a child from the moment of birth is a prisoner sentenced to live in this world until death, unaware of the sentence's details. What we can know is that we come to realize our lives are utterly futile. This realization grows clearer as time passes and we age. Who among us can boldly say that the love, friendship, success, honor, and power we so indulged in were not futile? Truly all is vanity. No elderly person doesn't say this. Not only the elderly, but young people already know futility and despair. Why do we, living with such radiant hopes for a golden future, end up despairing and feeling deeply deceived by life? Because the performance of our life is too short. So let's extend the performance of life. Suppose someone lived 200 or 300 years. They'd be like a mad spectator, watching the same play 2 or 3 times, growing bored of their children's, grandchildren's, and further generations' lives. Our life is like a play. You pay to see just once. Deceived once is enough. Amazed, joyful, or sad just once is enough. Regret, too, should be just once. In other words, life is valuable only when lived once. I don't hope to live well, just not to be in pain. In the first half of life, like everyone, we're filled with great desires, hopes, and ambitions for happiness. But in the second half, though it varies by person, we realize the love, happiness, or ambitions we craved were mere products of delusion. If you haven't realized this in the second half, you're still living in the first half, or you're a fool. Thus, a wise person hopes not for intense pleasure, but merely for the absence of pain. They think it's fortunate if they can avoid the disasters or misfortunes we often see around us. I don't hope to live well, just to live without pain. If such words come from your mouth, you're already living in the second half of life. In my youth, when I heard a knock at the door, I'd think, hey, something good's coming, and feel excited. But after aging and experiencing life, when I hear a knock, I mutter, I hope it's not bad news. If there's no pain and no joy, that's the happiest state. The greatest lesson I take regarding living in the world comes from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. The wise person desires not pleasure, but a state without pain. The wise don't seek pleasure, but merely wish for no pain. For example, suppose a small thorn is stuck in your hand, causing severe pain. Your whole body may be healthy, but you don't appreciate or care about that at all. Your attention is entirely on the pain from the thorn, ignoring other joys or pleasures. Moreover, even if your business is going well, if one thing doesn't go as planned and causes dissatisfaction, you don't think about the others. Our sense of victimhood and pain depends on this workings of the mind, the will. The will's action is active and direct. Aristotle's teaching seems to focus on this point. We must not aim for pleasure or ease, but pursue a state of calm without pain. If this approach is wrong, then Voltaire's famous saying, "Happiness is a fragment of a dream, and only pain is real," would also be false. Living happily means living as painlessly as possible, barely enduring. Life is not lived to enjoy pleasure, but to train in enduring pain well. Thus, happiness rightfully belongs, not to those who enjoy great joy and pleasure, but to those who endure pain well. If we set joy and pleasure as the goals of happiness, we'll be trapped in greater pain, from dissatisfaction with ourselves and envy or jealousy toward others. If you're in a state with no pain and no boredom, you can say you're happy now. Thus, we shouldn't strive to gain pleasure and joy, but try as much as possible to avoid pain. But because most people can't do this, they become even more unhappy. A large oak is easily broken by a storm. Wise people don't pursue pleasure, so they don't fall into despair. Goethe said, "Those who want something better than what they have are blind with their eyes open." We live each day, caught by the bait of expectations and hopes for happiness and pleasure, but we must give up pursuing happiness, satisfaction, or pleasure. The surest way to avoid great misfortune is to not pursue happiness. Goethe said he learned from his friend Marek, "What defiles and eats away at life is the base desire for happiness. Only those who cut off and renounce this desire can become true victors over life." Thus, the wisest path is to abandon desires for pleasure, wealth, honor, power, or success. All misfortune sprouts and stems from there. Excessive desire is poison. This can be seen in the poetry of Horace. If you understand my philosophy well, everyone would realize that not living is better than living. From a profound philosophical perspective, since life itself has no value, rejecting survival itself may be the greatest wisdom and enlightenment. Plato said, "There's nothing in our lives to be enthusiastic about." But the 12th century Persian poet Anvari Zohairi expressed this even better. "Do not lament even if you lose the world, for this world is vanity of vanities. Do not rejoice even if you grasp the world, for this world is vanity of vanities. Pain and joy are but fleeting dew, and in this world gain, loss, good, and evil are vanity of vanities, nothing and nothing." Money cannot build a sturdy house of happiness. There's no more foolish thought than earning great wealth to build a house of happiness on that foundation. When you have no money, you think everything will be happy? If you have it, but no structure collapses as easily as a house built on money. That's what sets it apart from other buildings. Designing overly grand ambitions in youth is like planting misfortune at every turn. The grander the ambition and design, the higher the chance of failure. Few achieve the great goals they set, and most fail or find them impossible. Even if, after years of effort and struggle, a plan succeeds, by the time everything is achieved, it's often useless. And with all passion and energy spent, others may end up taking it all. People who sacrifice youth to amass wealth often leave it as an inheritance to their children, without ever using it themselves. They live their whole lives as slaves to their children, especially among writers or artists who establish their artistic world in old age. They have little time to enjoy that glory. Because art changes with the trends of the times. After one generation passes, a new generation renders their achievements obsolete, and they see new artists surpass them. Thus, the painstaking efforts of humans, based on themselves and reality, are swept away by the great currents of time and fate. Horace sang of this situation. Why make endless plans, burdening a frail heart? At the entrance of youth, life seems long, but at the exit of old age, nothing is as short and futile as life. This is one of the great illusions we experience in life. To escape this illusion, we must closely heed and accept the conclusions of our predecessors. Thus, wise people foresee the wisdom of old age, even in youth, and follow fate's teachings, while others realize the words of the wise only after living a futile life, beating their chests. We must pursue wisdom instead of pleasure, enlightenment instead of happiness. Monotony and simplicity lead to happiness. What makes us happy lies in doing small, trivial things well. What are small, trivial things? Reading a book alone, listening to music, enjoying meditation, sweeping the yard, or gazing at flowers? It's the ordinary routines of daily life. We enjoy happiness more when we look at a narrow view rather than a wide one, and when our range of action is narrow rather than broad. Looking broadly at the world increases desire. The wider your perspective and range of action, the more desires arise. And with desires come growing worries and anxieties to fulfill them. The more people you meet, the more friends you have, the more people you like, the greater the scope of your hopes and desires, increasing the chances and environments that invite misfortune. To be happy, minimize the fluctuations of will and mind. Pain arises from an active mind, while happiness comes from a passive one. Stability, calmness, and tranquility of mind are far better than the misfortune that comes from ambition, busyness, noise, and haste. We can make this premise because we know the despair and futility that follow achievement. When writers, painters, or musicians depict happiness in their works, they portray pastoral, idyllic, natural scenery, calmness, and beauty, showing us where human happiness comes from. Don't they always praise secluded countryside, natural landscapes, solitude, and tranquility when depicting happiness? Artists know well that monotony and simplicity are the basic conditions for happiness. A simple, monotonous life, that alone is the path to enjoying happiness. Ultimately, human happiness and misfortune depend on mindset, but those who can endure simplicity and monotony must have the intellectual capacity to handle an intellectual life. Only then can they escape the shadow of boredom. Sexual desire is the most complete expression of the will to live. The will to live manifests as an effort to sustain itself. But this is merely an effort to preserve the species. The effort to preserve the species occurs over the long term and surpasses the importance of individual survival. Sexual desire is the most complete and clearest expression of the will to live. This perfectly aligns with the fact that individuals arise from sexual desire, and sexual desire surpasses all other desires. When love blinds, it can clash with the character or nature of the beloved, because aside from sexual relations, people fall deeply for a reason they should despise or naturally ought to abhor. But since the will to preserve the species is stronger than the will to preserve oneself, those in love close their eyes to traits they should dislike, overlook everything, misunderstand everything, and remain forever bound to the object of their passion. While caught in such folly, the lover is blind, but once the goal of species preservation is achieved, the folly vanishes, leaving only a loathsome lifelong companion.